Let's join in a spirit of meditation, reflection, or prayer as we deepen into our service. And our opening words this morning come from Reverend Ma Tet Gustia Garado, who is the president of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines. Let us hear, let us see, let us be. Source of life, taker of life, transformer of life, life itself, we implore you, hear us. Let us hear ourselves. Let us hear our own cries for help. Let us hear the pangs that rise from our bodies. Let us hear our bodies. Let us hear our breaths. Let us hear our living soul, its bellowing laughter and unquenchable fire. Let us hear our being moaning under the burdens of our own doing. Let us hear our own weight crush the earth which nourishes us. Let us hear our cells cry out for nourishment. Let us hear our own nature longing to be. Let us hear our loving being longing to see. We implore you, see us. Let us see ourselves. Let us see that we are not alone, that life has riches and we can breathe them all in, that we need not be afraid, but instead take comfort. Let us see in order to distinguish what is right and what is true. Let us see the effervescent longings of others to like us without our feeling obligated. Let us see the lakes of furious madness that pull us under. Let us see what forces us to succumb to wrongs. Let us see that singular moment when we could say no with triumph, to step back, look in, and laugh. Let us see that most absurd point of clarity when change can happen. Let us find that lost ground that all humanity walk on if they were one people. Let us see the versions of ourselves that could have been if we had lived those lives we don't know. Let us see and understand and accept who they have become that we are not. Let us see what wicked lies divide us so we can be who we are. We implore you, be us, be in us, be of us, be for us. Let us be that gardener who thinks not of grand schemes as she touches the growing wonder of flowers. Let us be that satisfied customer, the one who looks foolish because she is happy. Let us be that strange person who is not overcritical or overanalyzing, who can let life in. Let us be that retired actor, tired of being drama king. He is no longer in a play. Let us be that musician no one hears, who yet composed another spoiled libretto that sees the trash. Let us be that ambitious girl whose home is so far from school and she has to trek mountains clutching to her dreams. Let us be that expressionless exotic face you cannot read. Let us be that Filipino overseas worker who has to leave her family for years in order to feed them, only to be tortured by her employer and tried by their law for theft she did not commit. Let us be that student activist who can't understand why she is underestimated only because she does not have power. Let us be that person who understands that power does not make everything legitimate. Let us be that person who suffers for others. Let us be that person who comes to worship in order to understand. Let us worship.
We join Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists all over the world in lighting our chalice. We are in good company. If you have your chalice with you, I invite you to turn on your video to share while we light them. We light our chalice this morning with words from Deanna Van Diver. We light this chalice, a symbol of our faith alive in this world, naming our vision of collective liberation and daring to remember each other into beloved community. And now it's time for our sermon, which will be delivered by Reverend Karen Van Fossan. Karen was minister here for what seemed like too brief a happy time. It's gone on to to other endeavors, including writing a book, which we're all looking forward to the publishing of. Karen, take it.
Thank you. Each month, behind the wheel of my 2002 Toyota, which runs better on the inside than it looks like it might from the outside, I take the 221-mile drive past teeming lakes, clustering trees, and any number of big box stores to Sandstone Federal Correctional Institution in Sandstone, Minnesota. Or I used to. Rattler, who many of us here today know and love, once lived at Sandstone Prison, along with roughly 1,155 other imprisoned men. During the Standing Rock movement, Rattler served as camp security, as a Kichita, a Lakota role of protecting the people, as I understand it. All 6 political prisoners from the Standing Rock movement, Rattler, Little Feather, Angry Bird, Dion, Red Fawn, and Bravo, are Indigenous people who were targeted by the US government for engaging in an Indigenous-led struggle to preserve Indigenous ways of life on Indigenous lands. Responsive to the call from Standing Rock, Jessica Resnicek, a white activist from the Catholic worker movement, tampered with the pipeline south of here in Iowa. For this resistance, this solidarity with an Indigenous-led struggle, she has also become a political prisoner of the United States. According to the Fort Laramie Treaties of 1851 and 1868, as well as many others, the pipeline crosses all over Indigenous lands. I also crossed Indigenous lands, Lakota, Dakota, Hidatsa, Anishinaabe, and more, as I journeyed to Sandstone FCI. It's a minimum security facility not too far from the Kettle River and the sandstone ridges which that meandering Copper River has helped to create. The prison sits just about dead center in aptly named Pine County. I saw sandhill cranes for the first time in my life there on the sandstone grounds. The sandhill cranes, the river, and the rest of Pine County are separated from the men of Sandstone FCI by a double row of massive fencing, untold lengths of spiraled razor wire, and hordes of well-locked doors. The first time I visited Rattler, having just been granted visitation privileges 8 long months and 3 very frustrating visitor applications after he was admitted, I stopped to snap a few pictures from the scrappy front patch of lawn. I was inspired by Leola Cowboy, who had recently shared a selfie from the outside of USP Hazleton in West Virginia, where Little Feather, her now former spouse, was doing time. That selfie of Leola, even with the copious razored fencing of Hazleton in the background, had been strangely comforting to the rest of us, loved ones who had become loved ones through our resistance to the pipeline and the violence it brought. I thought Rattler's loved ones, his new spouse especially, might be just as comforted by a sandstone selfie, fencing, razor wire, and scrappy patches of grass notwithstanding. But a female guard, twice my size in muscles and bulletproof padding, burst from the solid door. "Are you a visitor?" I nodded and tucked my phone away. "What are you doing? Are you taking pictures?" As I mumbled something about the rest of Rattler's family maybe wanting to see where he's living now, she interrupted. "You better not be taking pictures of our fence, or you'll never visit here again." I didn't love this exchange. But as far as harassment by armed authorities goes, it was nothing. I wasn't threatened with the loss of my life, just the loss of a life-giving experience, and the loss of a life-giving experience for a loved one on the inside. That's why I didn't speak up, keep my camera running, or make any gesture that could imply I was doing these things. As harmless as this experience turned out to be, it stays with me now because of how it troubles, ever so slightly, my own settler colonial identity, an identity which has always depended upon the consent of other settler colonials to maintain. Descendant of settler colonial culture though I may be, the guard had the prerogative in that moment by the door to treat me like a quasi-prisoner, a proximal prisoner, an outsider to settler colonialism because of my proximity to a prisoner and the imprisoned body. Jessica Resnicek, even as a descendant of settler colonialism, has now become a prisoner herself for the proximity she created between her own body and the anti-colonial water protector movement. She switched sides, so to speak. She didn't play her settler colonial role, and now she's doing 8 years in prison with a $1 million fine. This past summer, as many of you know, I was also arrested and jailed for my own proximity to the water protector movement and the indigenous-led resistance to the Line 3 pipeline. My next hearing is this week, and while a few activists in the know have told me I'm a pretty good candidate for the system to make an example of, I sincerely hope I don't go back to jail. I wonder if my ancestors experienced moments like these, this fear of jail and punishment and injustice. If they were anything like the European immigrants of history, my Scottish, German, and Irish ancestors, to name a few, would have fought, sometimes literally, to be admitted into settlerness, into whiteness, into Americanness, into the in-group here in the US, in order to be free from, or at least more free from, injustice. As traumatized peoples from Europe, my ancestors fled hunger, abuse, and environmental degradation. To be white Americans, they gave up their own histories, covered their own pain, and shifted, to a greater or lesser extent, their historical suffering onto the more recently colonized peoples of Africa and this continent in order to be safe, or at least to be less in danger. Even today, a safe neighborhood is often code for a predominantly white neighborhood, regardless how much domestic violence, child abuse, and emotional suffering happens within, regardless, in fact, how unsafe such a neighborhood like the retreat at Twin Lakes might be for Trayvon Martin. Still, maybe that's what places like Sandstone FCI, USP Hazleton, and the new Burley Morton Detention Center are meant to guarantee: safety, security, separation. As a regular visitor at Sandstone FCI, I couldn't help noticing that the visitation room was one of the most culturally and ethnically diverse places that I generally experience in my regular North Dakota life. The only place more integrated in recent memory has been the water protector camps and happenings that have followed. Certainly, I was still a descendant of settler colonialism when I was visiting Sandstone FCI. I didn't become Black and I didn't become Indigenous, the two most prevalent backgrounds of people I would see there, along with white. But when I arrive at a prison as a visitor of a prisoner, I am situated for a time on the other side of the armor of colonialism. While I may not be an enemy of the empire exactly, not a person in a cage herself, I'm also not a friend of the empire, not a person with a key, a gun, or in those moments, a voice. For those moments, I feel my colonial status slipping. While I am not them, I'm also not fully us. My proximity to prisoners' bodies disrupts the white American identity that my ancestors struggled so hard to make for me. And this is how I arrive. These are my itchy ancestral memories as I travel among the cabins and lakes to Sandstone FCI. On that first visit, Rattler and I sat face to face, hunched forward in our seats, part bench, part pew, part chair. Except for the matching uniforms, tan, except for the volume of talking, much, you'd almost think we were visiting at an oversized indoor bus stop. In a 1-gallon Ziploc bag, I had brought $40 in quarters for the various mismatched vending machines, which slumped along the exit wall. Under a sign, "No refunds," printed on standard copy paper, half the machines didn't function. The others didn't disclose the various prices of their items. No meals were served in that room, so you had to buy lunch for your loved one. Rattler, like every person in prison, was barred from any contact with the vending machines, the microwave, or the money. Everything prison-related seems to cost money. There's a copay to see the doctor. You have to buy soap and shoes and phone time. Even sending money to prisoners' commissaries costs money. Dion, one of the NoDAPL political prisoners who also did time at Sandstone before his release, had a job in the Sandstone kitchen. He made 50 cents a day. One evening on the phone, we figured out he had to work 14 days to afford one commissary pizza. It's slavery, we both said. Even though in 1863 enslaved peoples were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, even though in 1865 the 13th Amendment abolished slavery for good. But as you may well know, there's one clear exception to the 13th Amendment, quote, punishment for a crime, end quote. If you've been convicted of a crime, according to the US Constitution, you can be made a slave. And it's not just the wages. When Little Feather and Leola wanted to have a legal marriage with full benefits of the certificate, they chose a few places and times. They asked if I would conduct it, as I was vested with that colonial power. Since they had been wedded in their hearts from the days of Oceti camp, we liked to call the event their re-wedding. But the re-wedding wasn't allowed. Not while Little Feather was in prison or later in the halfway house, because an authority of the state, not Little Feather himself, had the power to decide. As Frederick Douglass said in 1845, I didn't know I was a slave until I found out I couldn't do the things I wanted. Prison is the epitome of not doing the things you wanted. Prison is the slavery of our age. I'll never forget the first time I saw Little Feather in chains, or Rattler behind those fences, or Dion and later Red Fawn behind the visitation glass, or Bravo ordered to stay within the city limits of Bismarck, or Angry Bird peering at the judge up on that throne-like chair. When the federal defendants from the Standing Rock movement, Red Fawn, Little Feather, Rattler, Dion, Bravo, and Angry Bird first received their charges, they faced possible sentences, mandatory minimums of 10 years and up. After many struggles, legal advisors made a difficult recommendation. Cut your losses, take a plea, do less time. According to Daniel Hovland, the judge in each of these cases, 95% of federal defendants take plea deals. This means 95% of people in the federal system never have a trial, forfeit the right to appeal, and lose a chance to have their story heard. That's the reason, one of the reasons, loved ones have formed the NoDAPL Political Prisoners Support Committee. So the story, which doesn't end there, doesn't have to end there. Here's Red Fawn. I stand in peace, she says, in prayer and in solidarity with our relatives through every struggle. Remember the strength and the lives of our ancestors. Never give up, my strong heart relatives. Here's Christina, Dion's mom. My son had a purpose. Water is life, that's why he was there. Whatever he did to protect the water and the water protectors, he did out of love. Here's Angry Bird. We need to come together as one, not as one better than the other, and to remember it's going to take us all to help fix what we're destroying. If not for us, then for our children and children's children to live. Here's Rattler. When I get out, quite honestly, if the fight isn't over, I'm going to jump right back in it because it's the right thing to do and it's where I belong. So when I get out, I've got your back. Here's Bravo, who has gathered razor wire that was used to keep water protectors away from sacred sites and makes that razor wire into dream catchers. We figured we would take something that was negative and meant to hurt us and turn it into something positive. Here's Jessica. There are many who have come before me who have spent time in prison for their convictions. Who knows what may contribute someday to making the world a better place? And finally, here's Little Feather. Please let our people know that I love them and I'm honored to be where I am at for them. I want our people to know also to never give up hope on our movement. Our first UU principle absolutely insists on the inherent worth and dignity of each person. Our seventh principle absolutely insists that the web of life is interconnected and that each of us, each person with dignity and worth, is part of that shared web. In our UU tradition, we understand that our vitality depends upon that shared web, upon each member of that shared web. Freedom for one group does not come from the lack thereof for another. Instead, vitality is shared, freedom is mutual. Through our belonging, through our connectedness, the web itself and each of us within it becomes more whole. A few years ago, though they're not together anymore, Little Feather and Leola did have their re-wedding. We assembled down by the Missouri River, not far from where many of you are right this moment. That was the same rolling river that so many of us had gathered to protect. We wrapped Little Feather and Leola up in a star quilt, green as Mother Earth, blue as the wide Missouri. We made our prayers that day. Many loved ones, Little Feather, Leola, my daughter, my grandbabies, some of us here today, in many languages, in many ways. Some of us touched the water, all of us touched the earth. We took pictures for the ones who couldn't join us. We said blessings for the ones who couldn't join us. We called upon the ancestors, theirs, yours, mine. We named a painful past. We envisioned a sacred future. In spite of the pain that has come before, in spite of the pain that has come since, maybe in that circle, maybe in that moment, maybe with one another, we were free. Thank you.
robe and crown, good Lord, show me the way.
We will now extinguish our chalices with words from Maureen Killoran, then listen to one more beautiful piece of music by Alicia while we sit and with all we have felt and heard today. This is the message of our faith: to act with passion in the face of injustice, to love with courage in the midst of life's pain. This is the meaning of our chalice flame. May it empower our hearts until we are together again.